There were a lot of good things you could take away from the Heat's win over the Wizards last night. Duncan Robinson with 8 threes had a good bounce back. Tyler Hero had 32 points, just a really all around game, passing wise, just all around. And then obviously Jimmy Butler, 25 points, 15 assists, and 8 rebounds. I said before the game, a 20 plus point game where he flirted with a triple double seemed like it was where you're coming from because Jimmy doesn't usually have those first games after an injury where he's inefficient. And it was kind of the case in the first game. Coming back, he just looked healthy in this one. Obviously, now the worry will be about that ankle, which he said is all right, but now they're heading over on a road trip. We'll see what happens from there. But I just want to go over some of the things we saw from Jimmy specifically and also what changed in the offense because it's something I talk about a lot within the offense is mid-post play because it's just so important with this Heat team when you look around at the personnel they have. If we go across the roster, obviously Jimmy Butler's a guy that takes it up a lot. Bam Adebayo is a guy that was used within it a lot, and it was without Bam. That's why Jimmy had so much more usage in the mid post in the last game yesterday because of not having Bam in there to kind of mix it up and go half and half. Markieff Morris, another guy that, again, this season, he had a ton of reps in the mid post, and it was working pretty well to begin the season. When guys went out, PJ Tucker tried to emulate it a little bit. It wasn't really working as they probably wanted, but mostly those three guys, the guys that could work it through, they've been without all four of those in and out of the roster. In and out of the lineup to begin the season up to this point. But now with Jimmy Butler back, they were able to go through it. So I just want to go through some of the things that come out of it. And last night, 15 assists, 8 of them were to Duncan Robinson. And it feels like almost all of his assists were coming out of the mid-post, just feeding guys off-ball movement, which is where Miami's offense pretty much thrives. So we start right here. We're going to see Tyler Hero is going to fly off. Basically an end-around screen at the top, and then Duncan Robinson setting a pin down. He flies off the pin down, then Duncan Robinson immediately flies off of that Marcus Garrett off-ball screen. Here's Jimmy, just easy baseline mid-post feeding Duncan Robinson for the wing three. The interesting thing about that Duncan three is I go back one more time just to watch him come around that end, and the defender's trailing him. He just rises up right over the top, and it's something I asked him about after the game. I asked him if he can tell the difference between he always sees tight defense, but if he could tell the difference between usual tight defense that he sees and maybe a guy overplaying them where he can turn that corner and go inside, or if it's just the usual end around trail that like you saw right there where he can just rise right over the top. It's hard to pick out in real time, but obviously Doug Robinson talked about that he's seen every coverage at this point, and it just feels that way. Now it's just about feel, and he can kind of feel it out the guy in his hip where he kind of stands, and stuff like that could come out of it. Another one, as I go to the next one, we see Jimmy working in this baseline. This is a very just interesting way to go about things. It actually works pretty well. It's something they did a lot with Kyle, actually, because Kyle is very good with that loop pass where he gets to loop it right over the top on these type of off-ball screens. Jimmy is, a talented passer as well, so he can be emulated in this way too. So we see right here, Yurtseven sets the off-ball screen right over the top to Duncan. Denny Avdia doesn't really make the cut over and split the difference fast enough, so it's just an easy look for Duncan. He'll make that more than enough times if you give that type of shot for him, especially when he gets going in a game like this. Another ones we're talking about just overall Duncan, Jimmy combinations. We always talked about Bam being Duncan's guy, which he was because Bam got him almost all of his looks off handoffs. That was where they went. To begin this season, they got away from that. It felt like Kyle and Bam were more of the pair because it was Kyle trying to set up Bam, get Bam to either that jumper, maybe a lob. Jimmy was basically the guy, Jimmy and PJ half and half, but obviously Jimmy is more the guy that's taken over getting Duncan his good looks. And it's interesting because he can do it in a similar way as Bam because he can run similar handoffs on this wing. But there's a little bit more of a threat there with Jimmy because he's doing it in a spot that he's able to score in. So as we see right here, as I go back one more time, he does a little flip handoff right here after Duncan screens. And the interesting thing is Duncan has Gafford on him. They were doing a lot of blitzing, and they couldn't really recover. So they would find these little mismatches. And there's nothing better in Jimmy's game than finding the guys on the floor that have a mismatch. And that's what he did right here. Flipped it to Duncan. Duncan can rise up right over the top, and he can hit it. Another one, talking about a lot about passing from the mid post. But the reason why Jimmy can be so effective as a passer in this spot of the floor is because he's also a very effective scorer in this part of the floor. As he goes right here late in the game, this is one of the bigger shots of the night because Washington obviously was edging back closer and closer. Jimmy couldn't get his fourth quarter off because of it. But this was a big shot right here. He had about 3 of them late in the fourth, but just backing a smaller defender down, rises up over the top of him. and he hits it. It's probably one of his most comfortable shots, just turning over that right shoulder and getting to that shot. It's just an interesting way they can go about things. Another one, as we see right here, Omer Yurtseven. It's an interesting prospect because we honestly talk about young bigs being aligned with a veteran big. Udonis Haslem plays one-on-one with him and he gets him involved. But it feels like Jimmy's almost taking him under his wing a good amount when they're on the floor, because he talked about the other night when Omer Yurtseven had 16 and 15 that he could have had 30, and he probably could have if he got to his spots a little bit differently. Jimmy said there was different times in the game where he wanted him to maybe speed up a little bit more on the roll, which it's just about kind of feeding off whoever the ball handler is at that time. The guys go at different speeds. Jimmy's a little bit faster in that way, that he'd have to roll faster. But just watching Jimmy like on this type of play where he's coming for the screen, he looked like he was calling Omer for the screen, but he takes this left dribble to kind of let Omer know, just to kind of fade and drift into the middle of the floor. As you see right here, right before this, as I go back, he kind of calls him up and then goes, calls him up right here, dribbles left, he drifts, hits him, and Omer goes right up with it. Because if Omer didn't go right up with that, he probably would have been hearing from Jimmy quite a bit in the next time out, just because Jimmy wants him to take that shot. Omer maybe should get to that a little bit more than the post hook. The post hook is a decent shot for him, but I think he relies on a little bit too much. If he can go to that little floater at times, just right in the middle of the floor, that feels like the better way to go. The last one, in games where there's just so many guys that you're down with overall, the team that usually can draw two to the ball more often or has more players on the floor that can draw two to the ball will probably win most of the time. Right now, they had three guys in Tyler, Duncan, and Jimmy that were on the floor that can basically do that. There wasn't many on the Washington side that really were late in this game, but just seeing the different threats of that, and also a threat of a Tyler Hero, Jimmy Butler, pick and roll, as we see right here. So we're going to see Tyler come up. He's going to slip it immediately. Two are focused on Tyler, so now it's a 2-on-1 for Jimmy. What's going to happen next? Well, it's Jimmy Butler going to the rim. So I think we all know what's going to happen next. Two go fly at Jimmy this time, and now it's an easy layup for KZ. When you just have a threat at the end of the game and you can consistently send two and then send another two at certain players in these possessions, and especially when it's Jimmy closing out to the rim, he's always going to make the right read. You're pretty much in a decent spot. And I think we're consistently talking about one or two guys, but the thing is, I'm interested to see what they can do offensively when they have a full roster of guys, when they have Bam and Kyle next to these guys, and how many they can draw and how many different things they can do. But just seeing these combinations, Jimmy Butler, as I said, working from the mid post, but especially 15 assists, a career high. Some of it is picking up for Kyle Lowry because he knows he's not there, but some of it is just Jimmy Butler being within the offense and just making the right read at the right time.